Are you thinking of leaving corporate, but too afraid to make the move? Have you already escaped corporate, but are finding it hard to run your dream business? Are you wasting valuable time by attempting to figure challenges out on your own? We have created a podcast for corporate escapees running their own business. This is the Corporate Escapees Podcast by Build, Live, Give. We bring you first-hand experiences of guests going through many of the struggles you face each and every day as a corporate escapee. We get real with no corporate BS. And now, over to your host, Paul Higgins.
Hello and welcome to Corporate Escapees, the podcast that takes you behind the scenes of people who are successfully running their own businesses, hearing their war stories and motivations for making the jump from their corporate gig. I'm your host, Paul Higgins, and our guest today is someone who is an accidental immigrant to Australia. She had an amazing opportunity to start working for a startup that was a huge global US brand, and she talks about how they adapted that brand to be successful in Australia. But she left that because she had no family here to support her, and she wanted the flexibility to look after her son and help him through school. She now helps people to build systems to improve both their profitability, but also allow them to run their business without them being there, taking some time off, as she says, maybe sailing into the sunset for a while. So what I'll do now is hand you over to Debbie Eglin from Productivity Hub. Welcome, Debbie Eglin from Productivity Hub to the Corporate Escapees podcast brought to you by Build, Live, Give. So, Debbie, today we're going to get to know a lot about you, but why don't we start with something that your family or friends would know about you that our listeners wouldn't?
Yeah, sure. Hi, Paul. Thank you very much for having me. I guess something that not a lot of people realise is that I'm pretty much an accidental immigrant to Australia. I spent my late teens and early 20s travelling, around Europe, being a little British girl, and came backpacking here 20 years ago with my very brand new boyfriend who was, I think we've been going out maybe a month or something. We decided to do this trip. And then, 20 years later, here we are. It's, and I really wouldn't have it any other way. It's just that a lot of people assume that I am Australian and get a bit of a shock when they realise I'm not.
Yeah, well, you've done a great your accent, I think, is fantastic. I'd call it a beautiful Australian accent, not an English accent that's turned Australian. But 20 years, so I'm assuming the backpacker that you came out with is your husband now, but just...
He is, yes.
He is?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, he is. It's, it's funny. We've lived our whole life here, and we often say, my goodness, if we had stayed in the UK, would we have survived, or was it sort of Australia and the environment that made us so strong? So who knows? Who knows? But we are very, very happy in our adopted country.
Great. And tell us a bit about your corporate escapee story.
Yeah, sure. Well, I guess I was the first sort of few years I was here, I was bouncing around a few roles. My sort of corporate training, if you like, is C-suite executive assistant / administration manager. I guess my big corporate escapee story was I was part of the key management team who brought Krispy Kreme into Australia. So that really was quite an amazing experience. I was involved with the company for around 10 years, and very much was involved in the company from pre-store growth, so really at the embryonic planning stages, through to having multiple stores, setting up wholesale streams, and multiple revenue avenues. So it really was an amazing experience. I learnt a huge amount, in terms of practical skills across lots of different divisions of the company. But I guess my biggest learning from it was really, how to lead people, how to get the most out of the team. which is massively important, even if you have a very small team, which I do now. The working environment was definitely work very hard. I mean, we were working some solid hours, but we were very much greatly rewarded and appreciated. And I think I think that's a great thing. I guess sort of coming out the other end of it for me, when having a family was on the cards, I realized that I just really wanted greater flexibility, to be able to be around for my family and do what was needed. We don't have direct family here, so we're very much a sort of silo unit, aside from our sort of greater community. But I really did want that greater flexibility. So, sort of headed out on my own into that great world, and here we are.
Great. Well, before we go into detail on that in the build section, Krispy Kreme. So for most people, they know that it's one of the world's best donut experiences you could ever have. But so when you first started, did, the success that it had in Australia, was that, on expectations, above, below? Just give us a bit of an insight into that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it was definitely on expectation. The owners and the team around bringing Krispy Kreme to Australia, I don't think had any doubt that it wouldn't succeed. We did things quite differently in the Australian market versus the US market. So that was sort of a little bit of test and measure, because obviously there is there's sort of a solid history as to how they do things in the US, but it doesn't always directly translate into success into Australia. So, there was a little bit of test and measure there. But, I think the initial success really was built around just not advertising or not doing any above the line advertising, and really just allowing the product to speak for itself. That's really where all of the media came from, all of the buzz and all of the excitement.
Yes, well, I remember the queues of people when there's only one store in Sydney or something, and to get it to fly home to Melbourne. But you talked about the differences between Australia and the US. What were just a couple of key things you did different in Australia than the US?
Yeah, I mean, sort of looking at even the product range to a certain extent. I mean, the coffee is a big thing. Obviously we're drinking espresso coffee here, whereas, in the US it's drip coffee. So there was sort of, fundamental product differences like that. Even in terms of the positioning. So, in the US, a donut is a breakfast item. But in Australia, you can't promote it as a breakfast item because, let's face it, it's more of a treat. It's more of a treat.
Unless you're a policeman.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so there was sort of some fundamental differences like that. And then, then I guess just some slight differences in terms of language used around marketing and things like that you really need to translate for different markets.
Yeah, well, look, definitely, working for CocaCola for all those years, I saw that.
Yes, you would have.
Yeah, we had to localize, and I think that was the great thing with around, I suppose, that franchisee relationship, that you get those uniquenesses. And when you look at the time when you left, when you made that decision, what were some of the key fears you had at that time?
Oh, look, I think probably all the usual ones that, that everyone experiences at some time or another. Does anyone even want what I've got to offer? Is it going to succeed? Will I succeed? Am I even good enough? All of those sort of normal fears that you have that, I think still I ask the question sometimes, even many years later in business. Like I say, I think it's what most business owners go through, in just sort of questioning your ability and what you have to offer.
And as far as help, what help have you got along the way, whether it be mentors or books or podcasts? Like, who's helped you along the way?
Yeah, sure. I've had and engaged a few different mentors over the years. I've had some mentors for the last 18 months, which are focusing on the whole sales side of things. So, I think from a personal perspective, a mentor is very important to me. To the way that I work and the way that I can strategize in the business. And I guess my pattern has been that I take a mentor for an area that I need to work on, or I feel that an area of my business is weak. So I will get a mentor who has, good experience in that area that can really sort of help bring that up in line to the rest of the business. Other than that, I do try and get out to to different learning events and things like that. I will undertake some self-learning, which is generally around technology and new technology that we're looking at using or recommending to clients. So there's, I guess, sort of that is ongoing in the background. And then I do love to grab a book when I have a moment, but those moments seem to be a little bit few and far between recently. But just sort of staying on top of the latest books that are out, that are creating a buzz around the business community.
Great. And what are the key things that you look for when choosing a mentor? Like what's the things you look for, or the process you go through?
Yeah, sure. I think probably the number one thing that will make or break that relationship for me is whether we are connecting. And that's can you quantify that? I think it's really sort of a gut feel as to whether you like that person, whether you feel that your values are aligned, and whether you're really on the same wavelength. So that will sort of make or break. I guess the initial stages of looking for the right person will be down to skill set, as I mentioned. When I feel there's gaps in the business, I will look for someone with that particular skill set. So that will be one. And then generally I will ask around sort of my trusted community as to, who they're working with, anyone they've worked with in the past that they would recommend, etc. And then, like I said, the third is, are our values aligned, and is my gut saying, yes, this person's right, or, is there a niggling feeling there that maybe they're not perfect for me?
Okay, great. And the next section is the build section. So when someone says, "Hey, Debbie, what do you do?" How do you answer that?
Gosh, that question it gets me every time. It's quite funny, isn't it? Everyone's like, "What's your elevator pitch?" I think my elevator pitch changes every time, and I'm not sure why. But I guess in answer to your question, Paul, we systemize businesses so that the owner is able to thrive in their area of expertise and do more of what they love and they're really, really good at.
Great. And what type of businesses do you systemize?
So our sweet spot is service-based business owners, generally between 1 and 10 employees. That really is our sweet spot, our ideal client. We have worked with others a little bit out of that sort of target. But yeah, I do always prefer to go back to that type of business owner.
Great. And what are some of the common gaps you see when you go in to systemize someone's business?
Yeah, so I guess there's sort of two main gaps. One is the technology piece, and generally it will be they're missing a CRM, or more often than not, a task or project management platform. So those will be sort of, I guess, the two key pieces of technology that we find people are missing. The other one is really just having or not defining how they work. So they might have it in their head, but they haven't got it written down in a workflow or anything else. So anyone they try and bring into the business, they're just recreating the wheel every single time in terms of training. Sometimes things are missed and everything like that. So it's, just really sort of getting the info out of the head and down somewhere. And then the other key thing is really some key technology pieces.
Yeah, and when you talk to some of our community members and you mention the word like standard operating procedures or systems, they start to quiver.
Their eyes glaze over.
They've sort of fled corporate to break free of that, and then unfortunately it normally gets them in a bit of a mess because they don't have it.
Well, yep.
They sort of have this thing. So what's the myth about people, and how do you help people overcome the fact that some SOPs and some systems are actually really good for your business? They're not going to be a hindrance, they're actually going to help you.
Yeah, sure. I think that I think people get it through working with me, or even just through our initial conversations that we're having. Obviously I have a pretty well-oiled machine happening. So just through the conversations and their interactions, the touch points that they have with me, they just sort of naturally see that. And a frequent comment I get is, "Oh my gosh, I want something that works just like the interactions that I've just had with you, from just the online booking system, and then it's all nice and smooth, and they get a questionnaire, and it just sort of just flows." So that is sort of one way that I easily overcome the hurdle of people going, "Oh, yawn, this is all so boring, and really, do I absolutely need this stuff?" Because no one's got time to create. The other way that we help clients overcome it is we'll actually do the work for them. So, in terms of documenting their workflows, their client lifecycle, standard operating procedures, all of those things, we'll actually do it during an online session where it can be engaging. Hopefully I inject some fun and humor into the process as well, but we're actually doing all the work in terms of capturing what they're saying. We make suggestions as to how systems or processes can be improved. We identify where technology could help in terms of automation. So we're actually, I guess it's sort of a bit of a working discussion that allows us to pull the information out of their head while also adding our flair and our magic into the process. And then they have documented workflows that come out the end of that they can then use as as their project templates for clients, etc., etc.
Great. And how does the business model work?
So my business model, generally we've got, I guess, sort of three key stages that we take our clients through. The first one is a productivity audit. So when a client approaches us and says, "Look, I know I need help, but I'm not sure where." So if they haven't sort of identified where the roadblocks or their issues are, then what we'll do is take them through our productivity audit. And that really looks at their client lifecycle. It looks at what they want to be working on in the future so that we can align any recommendations that we have to their future needs as well. And we also look at the foundations that they've got in place in the business. And that really is kind of some admin 101 stuff, but it uncovers some very interesting situations and some really easy, quick wins for clients as well in terms of saving time and getting their business into the right shape so that they can scale quite easily. So that's the first stage. So that's really sort of looking at where they're at, where they want to be, and providing recommendations. We will then be able to implement those recommendations through a project, and that might be technology implementation. It could be development of the documentation. It could be recording of their operating procedures, creating videos, etc. So once we've got all that in place, then the client is ready to delegate or outsource. And that's where the true systemization comes into place. And we're sort of pulling everything together so that, they can go and sail their boat for 6 months while everything just happens within the business, because we've put that well-oiled machine together.
Great. And is that productivity audit a paid audit?
Yes, it is. It's quite an intensive audit, so it's a 2-hour audit. So it's 2 hours online with myself, where I'm asking a lot of questions, and then recording a lot of information, a lot of recommendations. We also start the systemization process at that early stage as well, in terms of we are documenting one of your client life cycles. So if you have a certain product or a certain service, then we're actually documenting that whole workflow so you can see how that works, providing recommendations, etc. And then I wrap that all up into a roadmap report, which gives you very detailed information in terms of what we recommend. Here's some links on how to do it. This is, how you do it, etc. I'm a great believer in that small business owners in particular shouldn't be 100% reliant on any service provider. So I like to give enough information so that they can go off and do it themselves. If they choose, if they have the time to. I always like to make sure there is enough information there for the business owner just to go, great, thank you. I've paid my money for the audit. This is amazing. And they can go off and do it themselves. If they choose to. So the audit is paid, but as I say, it's a pretty intense outcome that they get.
Great. And other than what you've already mentioned, what's unique about what you guys do? What do you do different than others?
So I think probably the key thing, Paul, is that we are very practical and hands-on. I do consult to a certain extent, but I don't like to leave the client sort of, oh, here's my recommendations, off you go and find someone to do it. So we will actually implement on the client's behalf, because one of the key things that we found with our clients is they are very time poor. And yes, they do want to employ a consultant to understand what recommendations are out there and what solutions are out there for them. But generally, they haven't then got time to implement. So we will actually do the implementation for them. And we really make it as easy as possible for them to make these changes within the business and, just sort of have everything happen.
Great. And how do you and they measure results? So how do you normally measure the results of what you do?
Yeah, so one of the conversations that we have at the beginning of the process with clients is really to understand what they want to achieve through working with us. And, that can be quite different for each client. Sometimes it's, what, I need to gain at least half a day back a week, or I need to gain, a week, a weaker quarterback. It may be that they have one of their issues is that they just feel like they're chasing their tail, and they're not organized in terms of clients, and they're not sort of sure what's happening when and things like that. So in that case, that is the solution that we need to come up with them. For others, it might be, in 2 years' time, I do want to be on my yacht, and I want to be, sailing around far north Queensland for 2 months of the year. And if that's their goal, then that's what we'll work towards in terms of offering a solution to them. So, so it really does depend on what they've identified and then what we've agreed in terms of the project pathway for them.
Great. And I know a lot of people say, well, look, if I've got money to spend, I'd rather spend it on revenue generating than reducing some of my costs or time. So, I'd rather spend on Facebook ads or whatever. How do you handle that objection if it ever comes up?
Yeah, and you know what, Paul, it does. It does come up because when people are struggling, they look at the budget they have available, and one of the first things they think of is marketing, is advertising, etc. So in that case, obviously I share the benefits of what we do, but at the end of the day, I'm not here to persuade someone that if people don't see the value, or if they're not ready to understand the value, then that's okay. Because I'm not going to push someone into working with me if they don't get what I do, because I need the client to be on board to make the changes. I need the client to be on board to implement the new habits that we're sharing with them, because if they don't, then they're not going to get the results, and therefore I'm going to fail in what I'm doing with them. I need them to be 110% on board and absolutely see the value in not only the money spent, but also the new learning and the new habits and things like that we'll share with them. Because if they're not, we're doomed to fail, and nobody wants that situation. So.
No, and what have you done to improve the profitability of your own business?
Yeah, so the profitability was something I struggled with for a while, because a lot of the work in the early years was very project based. So I've really sort of worked hard to, I guess, work on my funnel in terms of the journey that I walk with my clients. One of the key things that we've done with that in this last year is put together a VA program. So it's a virtual assistant program. We don't just provide VAs to people. There's plenty of suppliers that are doing that. But what we do is actually work very closely with the client to get them ready in working with a VA. So making sure we've got all of the processes, etc., done, but also make sure that they are comfortable and understand what it means to work with someone offshore as well. So we very much, or I very much, hold their hand while we walk through the process. And then once they've finished the program, then they will generally continue working with one of our team. So having that program in place has meant that we do have that recurring revenue coming in through the door. It's not a huge focus for us, but it is something that certainly helped with that profitability. I guess the other thing that I've done is just make sure that I've got the right sales pipeline as well, because previously it would very much be sell, deliver. Oh my gosh, I now need to sell again, and then I need to deliver. So,
Yes.
so I've very much have worked on that over the last 18 months, just to make sure that we, that sales cycle is just bubbling along, and that we've got enough in there to make sure that we're selling to new clients coming through.
Yeah. So if you're listening to this at the moment and you're wondering, I've got that exact problem that Debbie just mentioned. Debbie, what's some advice that you've done in the 18 months to turn that around?
Yeah, so the key thing is that I've been working closely with a sales training organisation and also a sales mentor. So, as we mentioned at the top of the call, that was really my focus in the last sort of 18 months. So I've really worked hard to structure and systemize my sales process. It was interesting when I looked at it, because even though the delivery of my business is heavily systemized, my sales side of things was kind of all over the place. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is crazy. This isn't how I work. So yeah, I've worked hard with the sales training company and the mentor, just really to systemize that whole process. So yeah, so it's just been massively helpful, and I think as well, really getting clear on what I offer, who I work with, and the journey that I take my clients on. Since really having that clarity, sales have actually become a lot easier, because it is, it's more of a conversation. It's more me just sharing what I do. And then if it fits with the client, then great. So it's, sales aren't scary anymore, which is a lovely, lovely thing.
Yeah. Well, I've always firm believer that sales is about working out where someone wants to go and seeing if you can help them get there quicker than if they did it themselves.
That
I
is
think
a great description. A
yeah,
great
if you've
description.
once you've and actually, I think someone once told me in Danish, it's something like that. That's the where sales came from,
Okay.
and that's what it is. So if anyone listening to this is Danish, certainly send me an email and confirm that. Um, so your team, tell us a little bit about your team. What's the size of the team? Where are they located?
Yeah, sure. So it's myself and two full timers, and they're located out in the Philippines. Um, and yeah, we'll be building probably another one or two out in the Philippines. I'd say before the end of the year, and then we'll be able to look at employing someone locally as well. So yeah, so we're a pretty tight team at the moment, but as I'm sure you'd imagine, we work very effectively together. So.
Yeah, great. And as far as your biggest learning of managing people that are in the Philippines, or I suppose
Mm,
anywhere,
mm.
remote staffing, what's been sort of your biggest learning versus, Krispy Kreme, where people are probably all in the office?
Yeah, I mean, I worked myself remotely for a period of time. So, and I guess just with the way that I work, I'm very comfortable working remotely. Um, I've I've visited the environment that my team work in, and so I know sort of the environment and the support and things that they work in. So I guess sort of having that familiarity is good, so that I can just really talk to them, and picture where they are and those sorts of things. Um, in terms of working remotely, you know, so much of what we do or what I ask my team to do is already defined. I'm creating videos, many, many times a day because it's the easiest and quickest way to share how I want my team to do something. So, pretty much everything that I ask them to do has a reference point of some sort. So they don't need to sort of struggle and really try and interpret what I'm asking them to do, because it's always very clear. Um, from a personal perspective, I absolutely speak with them online. I'd say, I mean, at least every day. So, sometimes we'll be online for a couple of hours. If we're training or talking through clients and things like that. So I think that communication really is absolutely key. And I think the last one is, I treat my staff exactly the same as if they were sat in the office, wherever they are in the world. So I think that's really important as well, that you don't just sort of have offshore staff there and forget about them. Um,
Mm.
it really is all about that sort of personal connection that you have with them. And these guys, they do so much for my business that I'm so appreciative of what they do, and how quickly they've learned. So yeah, and I think just really being a nice person, right? With your team. I mean, it's I hear some horror stories, especially when it comes to offshore stuff, and there's so much can be gained from just being a nice human. That's what I choose to do.
Yeah, excellent. And what are some of the biggest challenges that you face at the moment in your business?
Biggest challenges. Phew, that's a good one. I'd say sort of balancing cash flow and staff growth. And really sort of knowing when the right time to bring someone new into the business is, and making sure you've got the cash flow to cover it, and you can still pay yourself, and all those sorts of things. So I think from a personal perspective, that will probably be or is going to be a big focus for me in the next sort of 12 months, is really sort of trying to understand the financial side of a business, and what the common pitfalls are, and really just sort of learning around the numbers and how it can affect what I'm doing and plan and all of those sorts of things.
Excellent. Well, before we go into the next section, I'd like to mention our business quiz, which helps corporate escapees, just like Debbie, to see if they are fit for growth. Your answers are on a cool little bot where it takes you through some questions, and then you can either get the response emailed to you, or you can book a call where I'm more than happy to go through and answer some of those key questions that you've got. So to find out more, just go to buildlivegive.com and you can take the quiz today. So as I said, the next section's the live section, Debbie. And, what are some daily habits that you do to help you be successful?
So I guess in terms of business, I live through my project platform. So everything is managed through there. Delegation of tasks, delegation of projects, just capturing every single thing that is happening within the business is all managed through that. We've also got a proportion of our communications as a team when it's directly related to tasks or projects will also be managed through that. So that's a massive daily habit for me. And if it suddenly went up in smoke, we'd be in pretty big trouble. The other thing is I make sure that I have balance in my day. So I don't stack meetings. I won't have meeting after meeting. Maximum is probably 3 a day. And that's really just to make sure that I've got time to, craft a project plan of what needs to be done following that meeting, and then also implement what I need to implement, delegate what I need to delegate. Otherwise, if we're stacking meetings, then physically we're just burnt out. And if you're sort of trying to do this stuff late at night, it's nowhere to live. I'm also very strict about the hours that I work. So I've got a school-age son, and it's very important to me to be able to drop him off most mornings, and then pick him up most afternoons as well. So, I very much make sure that I've got the right balance through my week. And if that means that I get up early on a Saturday morning just to catch up with some admin, or have a client call if they're overseas, then that's fine, because it's meant that I've been able to to have real balance during my week, and I've been able to spend time with the family. So yeah, I guess those are sort of some of my daily habits.
And David, I know David's your partner. What would you like to say to him when he listens to this podcast about the support he's given you through this journey?
Well, gosh, I think I'm blushing a little bit there, Paul.
That's right. I've had someone cry before, so blushing and crying is all accepted here.
I don't think it's, you don't often get to sort of sit back and think about that, and, especially so publicly. So it's a very nice question. I think what I would say to Dave is, his support is and has been absolutely invaluable to me. There's been times over the years when I've wavered, in terms of, when we all go through this, oh my gosh, is it worth it? Yes. Is this ever going to really kick off? Am I ever going to replace my proper salary? And should I just give it all up and go back to corporate? He really has coached me through that a couple of times, and been very clear about what this business means to our family and our life. Just in terms of the not only from a financial perspective, but also just from a perspective of me being available for our family, and the fact that we can eat together each evening because, we're not coming home at 7 o'clock from the city, for example. It's all those, it's the little things that are really, to me, much more important than the financial gain. It is the fact that I can go and help out at the canteen and go and do some reading in class, and all of those sorts of things, because I have that flexibility, and I'm master of my own domain. So today your help is absolutely invaluable, and we're a pretty good team.
Well, the next question's the give section, and I suppose it leads beautifully into what you just said around community. So, what's a community or cause that you care about, and why?
Yeah, I think, like I said, to me, our immediate community is very important. We don't have family here. Our friends in our community are our family. So, so it's important that we contribute in, whatever way we can. And we are fortunate that we, as I just said, we have the flexibility and we have the time where, we can do things during the week that, other families may not be able to do due to working constraints. So, so we like to get involved in the local community and really help out where we can.
Okay, brilliant. And the last section's the action section, where I'll just ask you some questions and then get some rapid fire responses. So the first one is, what are your top 3 productivity tips, which I can't wait for your answer given what you do. So the mic is all yours.
Honestly, it's very difficult to keep it to 3, because when people ask, well, what are your tips? I'm like, blah, 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 blah. I guess my top tip is, don't over-engineer how you are working. I see this a lot, that people are just over-engineering not only the technology and the tools that they're using, but the tasks that they're performing as well. They're, for a lot of people, they're completing 5 steps when 1 step will work perfectly. So, just try and strip everything back as much as you can. In my book, simple is always better. With technology, because a piece of technology can do something, it doesn't mean that you have to make it do it. Quite often a manual way of doing it is a hell of a lot quicker, easier, simpler, and is just much more beneficial. So, so don't over-engineer how you work. Just try and strip back as much as you can. Number 2, I would say, get structure in your day. As I mentioned earlier, don't stack your meetings. Make sure that you do have time to breathe, have lunch, and implement. Batch tasks where you can. So, batch-like tasks. If you've got some sales calls to make, do them all at once. If you've got some videos to create them all at once. So just batch tasks, because that's a very effective way to work. Make sure that you schedule focus time as well. So if I'm working on a strategy or a piece of strategy for the business, or a new plan, or even some client work, I will schedule out focus time in my diary. So no one's going to book anything. My team know I'm focused, what I'm working on, and I'll give myself a good 50-60 minutes just to head down, bum up, and just get on with what I need to do. I guess the other thing that relates to that is I'm very aware of my energy throughout the day, and I very much match the tasks that I complete to that energy. So, for me in the morning, if I can get to my desk at 6 or 6:30, I can pump out so much work in the first 2 hours that it's crazy, and it's highly focused stuff that I'm working on, because that's my top time of the day. I'll then make sure that I'm doing just those recurring tasks towards the end of the day, because that's really when my concentration wanes, and and I'm kind of done. So that's also another tip. How many is that? Is that too many already?
Look, it is, and what we'll do is we'll definitely put links so people can contact you, read your content, etc. for more. Because, like, I'm sure we could make a podcast just out of it. And the next question, I'm a bit nervous in asking as well, because it's similar. But what are some technology or platforms? I know you spoke about a project management platform before.
Mm-hmm.
What do
Yeah.
you use, and what are some other ones that you'd recommend?
Yeah, sure. So I use Asana in the business, and I guess the reason that I use Asana is because it's a very solid platform that's been around for many years. It's also very straightforward to use, and if you set it up in the right way, it can also be very effective. So, Asana for me is a winner. But I mean, there's so many new platforms coming online, every day, every week, that it can really get quite overwhelming. But Asana is a winner for me. I guess if you do a lot of meetings, then it's worthwhile investing in an online booking platform. They're pretty common nowadays, and a lot of people are using them. But again, if you set it up correctly, make sure you've got your automations and things like that in place, it can save you a huge amount of time, and it can be very low cost as well.
And which one do you use?
I use Acuity Scheduling.
Okay, yes.
Yeah. I just like the platform. I like the integrations that it has, and and it's pretty much the same cost as all the others. I mean, similar platforms, are all very similar in cost. So it's really just looking at what you need from a features viewpoint, and then also looking at whether the platform integrates with the other bits of technology that you need it to talk to. That will generally allow you to make your decision as to what piece of technology you're using.
Great. And a book or a podcast you'd like to recommend, and why?
I listen to a few different podcasts, generally depending on my mood. If it's non-business, I'm a big fan of ABC's Richard Fidler, the conversations. It's nice to sort of escape with someone else's story for a while. But business-wise, I dip into The One Thing, which is a precursor to the book. They've always got some great stuff happening. James Shremko is always pretty entertaining. I like Flying Solo as well. They, depending on the subject, if the subject is something that I'm keen to understand about, then then there's some good stories on that, obviously, as well as yours, Paul.
Excellent. And what's some parting advice, Debbie, for someone listening?
Parting advice, goodness. I would say that if you can systemize your business, it will truly set you free. It sounds like a pretty bold statement, but it really will. And if you invest time now setting up your business correctly, all you need to do is set it up once, do it properly, and you will absolutely continuously reap that reward. And if the yacht's your thing, then off you go sailing on the big blue sea.
Excellent. Well, it was great having you on. You can find out more about Debbie and what her team does at Productivity Hub at productivityhub.com.au. She's got a productivity health check there. And as she said, also, she does a productivity audit, which I strongly recommend. You can also find her on LinkedIn. So we'll have all the links that Debbie mentioned, plus what I've just mentioned there, in the show notes. So Debbie, thanks a lot for coming in. I know that a lot of our valuable listeners really struggle with this, and I think the key for me is get someone who's an expert that can actually do the heavy lifting for you. You don't have to do it by yourself, and if it's keeping you awake at night because you're missing things, you're not giving the customer experience the one that they really want, Debbie and her team can definitely help you with that. So thanks, Debbie, for coming on.
Thank you, Paul. It's been an absolute pleasure. I very much appreciate you having me on the show.
Great. Thanks, Debbie. Bye.
Bye-bye.
I really enjoyed this interview with Debbie, and the key things that I took out of it, one is around the flexibility of working for yourself so that you can take your children to school, pick them up, etc., and actually really support your family and be a great member of the local community. The second is getting experts and mentors to help you where there's areas in your business that you're underperforming in. You don't have to know it all, and you can get experts to help you. And the third thing is not to over-engineer things. So I think it's brilliant coming from someone who is great at productivity, great at systems, but she says, just because the technology does do it doesn't mean you have to use it. And she really talks about stripping it back, and she's got some great insights. So that were my top 3 learnings. What I love for you to do is tell me what you learned out of this fantastic podcast. So you can email me at paul@buildlivegive.com. Also, if you know somebody that would get huge value out of what Debbie has shared today, please share it with them, because there's just one little insight that they take out of this could make a really big difference in helping them find both lifestyle and financial freedom.
Thank you for listening to the Corporate Escapees podcast, brought to you by the team at Build, Live, Give. If you found this podcast helpful, please share it with other corporate escapees. If you would like to join a community of like-minded peers, please visit www.buildlivegive.com. Until next time, thanks for listening and be brave.